Great. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. My name is Erica Lycan. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm co-founder of the People's Coalition. Along with my fellow co-founder Rima Mohammed, we'd like to welcome you and thank you for being here on this Friday night. If you're not familiar with us, the People's Coalition is a growing organization and movement founded in January of 2025. We are dedicated to uniting diverse communities, advocating for justice, equity, and sustainability. Our mission is to amplify the voices of marginalized and underrepresented groups, mobilize collective action for social and political change, and build a more inclusive society where everyone has the chance to thrive. Through solidarity, education, and grassroots organizing, we aim to dismantle systems of oppression and create lasting solutions that prioritize people over profit, equity over privilege, and justice over inequality. One of the ways we can change what is broken and address systemic inequalities in Michigan is by voting for and electing candidates who are determined to work for the benefit and betterment of Michiganders. The governor is a crucial leadership role in Michigan, and getting to hear from these two Democratic candidates for governor tonight gives us a chance to get to know these folks, where they're coming from, their experience, and their intentions if elected. So, as we're getting started here, I'll just share a few links to get to know more about us. If you're new to us, I've got a join our coalition link as well as some social media links I'm going to put in the chat as we get going here. There are those. Awesome. I will also say that building community, hosting events and actions and organizing takes work, of course, and it also has financial costs. If you're able to donate $5, $15, whatever you can, that helps us keep going and keep growing. So I'm putting a donation link in the chat. A little bit about the forum. Tonight's questions for the candidates were compiled and put together from all the questions we received as suggestions from you, everyone who registered. Thanks for sharing all these great thoughts and concerns. Because we have a lot to ask in a limited amount of time, we won't be able to take additional questions from the audience to our speakers. We have the group chat closed so we can save time and focus our attention this evening. As a reminder to our candidates, this is an individual response format, not a debate. Please use your allotted time to answer the questions posed to you by the moderators. Let's keep things civil and focus on the questions, and we will give each of you 2 minutes to respond to each question. So now it's time to meet our candidates. I will let Chris Swanson and Garlin Gilchrist take a moment to introduce themselves in 2-minute opening statements. As part of your introduction, please tell us what are your top priorities as governor if elected, and we are going to start with Chris. Please.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me okay, Erica?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Well, everybody's taking time to come here and honestly just spend time on a Friday night. It means a lot. Garland's a friend of mine. Hopefully, throughout this next hour or so, I tell you a great story that happened in Chicago. But ultimately, I'm here because I want the same thing that people here on this forum want, and that is voice. They want protection, service, unity. We wake up every day, we wonder what's next. I've had an entire career serving people, working in Flint, Michigan as a sheriff, but also coming up through the ranks as a paramedic, dealing with death and violence and brokenness and addiction and mental illness. And a governor, like you're right, Erica, is a great role for people to do great things, or it can be used as a weapon. It can be used to forget people that have no voice, people who have no coalitions, no forums fighting for them. And so my role as a candidate is to bring a new light to the political system, to bring people back to how we can form common ground, common sense. We can find solutions without being polarizing. There's people watching right now that have lost friends and families over politics and friendships that are busted because of just people drawing a line in the sand. And that's not what equality is. It's not what coalitions stand for. So you started this in January 2025 because you said enough is enough. That's the same thing that we're doing running for governor. The one thing that Garland and I and others that are running, Jocelyn, we have to keep Michigan blue. We know that a Democrat in the seat of a governor in 2026 is vital. Otherwise, we will take directives from Washington and there's going to be a dismantling. So I'm running because I'm looking for somebody like me. And I appreciate everybody just listening. I learn and I will continue to learn for not only this forum, but just talking to people. And it's a moment for me to live out what I know I'm capable of doing. And that's just loving and living with people and for people.
Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate it. Garland, we'll hear from you, please. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Erica and Rima. Thank you to the People's Coalition for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here with y'all this evening and spend my Friday with you. My kids are like watching a movie out there, so hopefully they don't run in here and ask me to do anything with the remote. Y'all, I'm Garlin Gilchrist. I've been proud to serve as your Lieutenant Governor alongside Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and I'm running for Governor of Michigan for a really simple reason. I want everyone to feel and know in their bones that they can afford to stay in Michigan and succeed. That's grounded in my own story of coming of age through public schools, going to the University of Michigan, and feeling like I needed to leave the state of Michigan to pursue the opportunity that I wanted to pursue, which was in that case being a software developer. I don't want any Michigan feel like they have to make that choice because they know that they have opportunity here. They can afford a place to live. They can find a job that meets their ambitions and their imaginations. They can afford to start and raise a family. They can have housing that they can afford. They can have college and education and training they can afford. They can live out the best years of their life here in the state of Michigan. But I also know that there's work that needs to be done for us to get there because, we have a system here in Michigan and frankly in this country that has been too dominated by the wealthiest people and the biggest corporations that dictated the terms of life that have made it so unaffordable and inaccessible for so many people. I'm running for governor of Michigan to be the person who speaks the truth to that power, no matter where it comes from. If it comes from Washington and the Trump administration that we have to stand up for to protect the progress that we against to protect the progress that we've made here in the state of Michigan, or whether it comes from any kind of interest in the state of Michigan that is seeking to make it harder for people to get ahead. I'm running for governor of Michigan because I want to be that fighter to stand tall for Michigan people, to address the issues of affordable housing, to guarantee childcare for every family, to make sure everyone has health care that's available and affordable to them. And that if they commit to Michigan, Michigan will commit to them in terms of their education, their housing. When we do that, this will be a place everyone can afford to stay and succeed.
Okay, thank you both for answering our introductory question. So I'm going to take the second question about fascism and authoritarianism. And so if ICE carried out raids in Michigan cities, as they recently did in Chicago and Los Angeles, how would you act as governor to defend Michigan residents' rights? And this question will start off with Garland.
So the first piece of this is what the Trump administration is doing by targeting and terrorizing this law, the American people, immigrants, citizens alike, with ICE is absolutely horrific and horrendous. So what we need to start with is making sure that our law enforcement agencies in the state of Michigan are not coordinating in immigration enforcement actions. The second thing we need to do is make sure we're setting up the legal regime to try to block them from coming here in the first place, whether it's ICE, whether it's National Guard troops coming from states like Texas or any state that has a governor that'll do whatever Trump says. We have to try to set up a protection window around the state of Michigan. The third is I'll make sure that Michiganders know that I'm going to stand with them. The immigrant communities across the state of Michigan have added so much to our communities, to our economy, to our education, and to our culture. They have to know that they're safe, seen, respected, and protected in the state of Michigan. We'll make sure people have access to the resources they need to fight legally. We'll do things like make sure we can, if people are taken from this state unlawfully, we will help to make sure that they have the legal resources to fight to get them home to their families and their communities. That's what I'll stand up for as governor.
Okay, thank you. Chris, same question.
Clearly we can see that this whole issue is being used as a weapon in many cases. People are scared, they're terrified. You're talking to somebody who is in law enforcement. And when you have people that are masked up, unidentified, no markings in a community, there's no good that comes from it, even if their intentions are to enforce laws. You see immigration, and I see it as three different levels of addressing is yes, the border and how it's being addressed, secure with a pathway to get into this country. For those that are here that are committing crimes against innocent people, those aren't the majority of the immigrants that we're talking about that have been here for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years that have applied and tried to do it the right way. And there's not been a pathway for them. They're paying federal tax, state tax, they're paying mortgages. Their kids have grown up here. They're married to people that American citizens, and those people were rounding up at Home Depots and on the side of the road. I would much rather the focus not be on trying to rip people from their houses and jobs, but how do we get them a pathway for citizenship? I've said before, if I could make them Michigan citizens, I would. I would be a part of that process to say, we're going to expedite legal citizenship. I'll do the background checks. I'll make sure they had no law enforcement, interactions. These folks, they make up 90% or more of the people that make this state what it is. And there's a people on this call that understand what immigration is. But I can tell you that ICE and how it's being weaponized is not what law enforcement is. And you see this going into cities. You see people that are scared. It's being used for the wrong intentions. We had two individuals that come to have sex with an underage kid that were under, immigration and illegal status. Those aren't the same people that we're talking about. The majority of the people that make up Michigan are trying to do it the right way. Let's help them.
Great. Thank you so much. I have the next question. Let me pull it up here. So we have seen outright attacks and targeting on immigrant communities, LGBTQ rights, Black and Brown communities who continue to face discrimination, hate crimes, and systemic inequities. As governor, what concrete steps will you take to protect these communities and their rights and ensure Michigan is a state where everyone can live safely and freely? And Chris, we will start with you, please.
Protect people. I have been in this business since I was 18 years old. I became a paramedic when I was 20. I don't ask questions when 911 calls come in. I don't ask questions as a sheriff. I take a litmus test of who needs help and who doesn't. We live in a state where people deserve dignity, equality, respect, and there's a way to do that without using people against each other. And so for a state to have a protection, but that protection has to come with a feeling of confidence that yes, not only is this a legal protection, but I have people that are going to stand up for me. In Genesee County, we've done that through our Ignite program, where we've taken people that have made bad decisions in jail and we've educated them without taking a list of who's qualified and who's not. Everybody's qualified to get a second chance, and we give that second chance. As a governor, you are a megaphone for those communities, and people need to know that you have to protect everyone. There's nobody that's off limits, and so part of that is also your background. Have you done this? And I can tell you, in Genesee County, I've made it very, very clear that we're going to set the tone over all these years to show what's capable of what we're doing. So Sunday, when we're at the Lady of Guadalupe doing a unity dinner, it brings people in. When we organize faith-based communities after the LDS shooting 47 days ago, we did that because we wanted to show that everybody is deserving of safety when you worship, whether it's a mosque, a synagogue, a church. These are the things that people want to see, not just here. Will you protect me? Will you protect my family? No matter who you love, how you worship, where you live, what you look like. And a governor is the same as a sheriff. We're there to uphold laws, protect people, maintain order. And that's what I can promise you.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Garland, we'll hear from you next, please.
So what's really important, and a really important difference between us and our, political opposition, is that their vision of the future is so small and so narrow that everybody doesn't fit in it. And that's why they use hate to try to harm people, hurt people, and push people out. Every community you mentioned and so many more, LGBTQ plus community, trans community, immigrants, Black people, Latinos, Asian Americans, Jewish people, Native Americans, Arab American, Muslim, like everybody who basically is not, straight and white, it's like doesn't fit in their vision of the future. But the best version of Michigan is a place where everybody has a place and a launching pad to be the best version of themselves. This is a state that was built for people who were coming to this state to seek opportunity and escape oppression. Michigan needs to be the kind of landing pad for that, like it was for my family, escaping the Jim Crow South and seeking opportunity as part of the Great Migration. That means that we have to make sure we're using every tool at our disposal to position people for success. I presided over a state senate that expanded the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to specifically and explicitly give civil rights protections to the LGBTQ plus community, such that people can't get kicked out of their apartment or fired from their job because of who they are and who they love and how they present. I made sure that we were able to ban things like conversion therapy or so-called conversion therapy. And now we can even go a step further because many of those marginalized communities they also have deeper challenges when it comes to things like homelessness, accessing mental health services, and healthcare outcomes. And I'll be a governor who invests in making sure that people know they are safe, seen, respected, and protected, because we are investing in communities, in people, make sure they have what they need to be here in Michigan and afford to stay here and succeed.
Thanks, Garlin. Appreciate that.
So the next question is going to be about campaign finance and transparency. So what has your personal approach been on accepting corporate or large PAC donations for your governor campaign now or in the future leading up to the election? And then how would you use your role as governor to address corporate and special interest groups and their influence on electeds and decisions regarding legislation, funding, and other state-related businesses? And this time we'll start off with Garland.
The answer to this question is no. The answer to have I and will I accept corporate PAC money is no. The answer to will I or have I accepted APAC money is no. The wealthiest people and the biggest corporations for far too long have dominated our politics with their money. The huge utility companies, again, the hugest corporations in our state, and that domination of our politics has frankly what's led to why so many things like childcare and groceries and healthcare are so unaffordable. If the millionaire and billionaire and corporate connected politicians are answering to those interests who fund their campaigns first and foremost, no wonder things are so expensive. So I absolutely reject that and do not think they should dominate our politics or our policymaking. And not only will I not accept that as a candidate, but as governor, I will be taking my cues from the people of Michigan. Like I went to all 83 counties in Michigan at least 3 times as lieutenant governor. That's how I listen and understand what's important in Michigan. I don't take my cues from the corporate interests that have the audacity to say things like we can't afford to fully fund public education because they're not paying their fair share of taxes, that we can't afford to guarantee childcare because they're not paying their fair share of taxes. I'll lead the charge to make sure that we can make our tax system fair and work for people so that they pay what they owe, so we as Michiganders can have what we need to be the best version of our state.
Thank you, Garland. So Chris, the same question.
Yeah, you're not going to buy Chris Swanson. I mean, I'm from Flint. We are used to working in grit. And we know that, if you look at the finance reports, I don't have millions of dollars. I raised $1,060,000 from people that I've known, my circles, $5 donations. I'm not taking DTE money. I'm not taking consumer money. I'm not taking corporate PAC money, not because I want to come on this coalition and make a bold statement. I want to work, and our money shows it. It takes a lot of money to run this race, and the Senate race has taken a lot of that money. It's taken a lot of oxygen. This is going to be a grassroots campaign, and I can tell you, it's not going to be who raises the most money that wins. It's who connects with the people. And if somebody writes me a $25 check and decides I'm going to use that against Chris, I'm going to say, because I gave you some money, you can do this. I'm going to send your money back. That's not how I am. That's not how I'm built. And that's where that transparency comes from. And that's why when you talk about campaign finance, that has to apply to everybody. I see this with all the sites coming in, with the Saline plant coming in, all these internal connections, and the people are paying for that. The people that can't get up and say, wait a second, why are we doing this? And it comes down to money. So to answer your question, not only are we going to at least make that declaration in our own campaign as governor, full transparency, reducing the FOIA exemption. So there's an exempt there's a way to look at government to say, how is it working? When there's nothing to hide, there's nothing to fear. I operate with that now as a sheriff. And so transparency is beyond campaign finance. I totally support raising your own money the right way, making it so it's the people's money, not the corporate monies. You still have to deal with corporations for the good of the state, which is true, but don't try to buy me off. And if you try to, it's not going to happen. If you want your money to be used against me, I'm giving it back.
Thank you for that response, Chris, and thank you, Garland, as well. So Erica?
Yeah, I have the next question, which is Michigan's working families are struggling with rising costs, stagnant wages, and shrinking safety nets. What is your economic agenda to build a sustainable standard of living for all Michiganders? And how will public support programs fit into your vision for economic stability and dignity? And we will start with Chris on this one.
affordability is very subjective because there's so many different classes, and the upper class and billionaire class is growing exponentially, while those at the lower middle class are just gutting it out every day. But the working class is what makes up Michigan. And the way to bring that up is to control what you can control. I have no say what the prices of soybeans and corn are at the federal level. I have no control what's happening in Washington when it comes to deals that are made. But what we can control is what's happening here in Michigan. How do we reduce costs, $200 to $300 a month, and things that the state charges? Should we look at anybody under $30,000 a year, whether it's a young person, a single parent, or somebody who's retired? Should they even pay state income tax? Do we do gas tax holidays to allow people to travel that can't go all these other great vacations but do staycations? Do we reduce regulation costs and licensing costs? All these different things just save people a little bit of money. We know that it costs to live, but on the flip side, give them an opportunity to make more money. When you try harder and harder and harder to make the money, but your dollar's getting shorter and shorter, well, that's something that as a state, we have to look at it and figure out how can we save everybody just a little bit, because that's like a relief pressure. And all of us are fitting in that. The working class is the majority of the state. And as a governor, everything is on a table. And I can tell you, as an emergency manager of the county, I look at it as when I go to a situation, in this case, as the governor, what do I have? What are my assets and resources? Where's it going? And what do I need more of? That's what we're going to do. It. Building the Michigan economy is not just throwing in huge companies and building, big mega structures. That's part of the process. But how do you support those small businesses? How are you giving these people who have ideas and business ideas the pathway to succeed? Because they're going to take that information, that money, and they're going to put it back in the community. Affordability is for everybody, not just one class.
Thank you, Chris. Garland, we'll hear from you, please.
Thank you, Erica. We need to start with ending poverty wages in Michigan. We need to raise the minimum wage to something that is actually affordable. I mean, if you meet somebody anywhere in Michigan that's earning $15 an hour, even right now, they are living in poverty. We need to end poverty wages in Michigan, raise our minimum wage to something that is actually a fair living standard for our people. And I'll fight to do that and lead the whole legislative process to make that happen. The second thing we need to do is make sure everybody has just the money in their pocket by making sure that, one, the state is able to provide some guarantees. Parents are struggling in Michigan to afford childcare. I got twins. I had to pay for two of them at the same time, same age. It's really expensive. There are people all over this state who are paying more for childcare than they are for their rent or their mortgage. We need to guarantee free childcare for every family in Michigan. Make Michigan the second state to do that. New Mexico became the first to make that commitment. I'll make Michigan the second as governor of Michigan. That'll save families tens of thousands of dollars every single year. That is money in their pocket to be able to afford something. And it also positions our kids to be stronger students, position them to be earlier readers. If they're in a structured pre-K school, structured daycare program, rolling into a structured universal pre-K program, rolling into K through 12, though, our third grade reading scores will increase and improve because kids will know their letter sounds when they get to first grade. It also takes a huge cost burden off of it. We also need to make sure that as people are going through their different stages in life, that we're helping them deal with their costs then. When people are ready to either go and pursue a skilled trade or training or go to college, we need to guarantee they can do that debt-free. We right now are providing a tuition-free pathway to community college and skills training. We have a Michigan Achievement Scholarship. We need to extend that all the way to all 4 years of college. I'll do that as governor, and we can pay for all this by making sure the wealthiest people and the biggest corporations pay their fair share in taxes.
Thank you for those responses. So the next question is focused on environment and energy impact. So what will you do as governor to limit the corporate and institutional expansion, such as data centers and factories, and associated negative outcomes related to these expansions, especially in vulnerable areas? And how would you hold these companies and institutions accountable? So this time we'll start with Garlin.
Any decision that we make in Michigan, whether it's an economic development decision, an infrastructure investment, needs to center our people and our environment first. We have more fresh water than any place else in the world, and we cannot make economic development decisions that jeopardize that. The way that some of these infrastructure projects, pipelines like Line 5, which needs to get out of the water, these data centers that when they are set up the wrong way, do nothing but put a straw in our groundwater and suck it dry like they've done in other states. We need to make sure these companies are doing things on our terms, on the state's terms, on the people's terms. We need to make sure these deals do not lead to people having to pay higher utility bills. We already have some of the highest utility bills in the country here in the state of Michigan, and some of the lowest reliability. And yet these companies, all they do is go to the Public Services Commission and ask for rate increases every 12 months or every 18 months. That's unacceptable. They need to be held accountable for that. We need to have a policy that looks at polluters and makes them pay. We also need to have a new policy and regulatory framework around collective impact, because we have communities, for example, like in Southwest Detroit and in Dearborn, where you have all these different industrial sites that are all right next to each other. And while individually the pollution that comes from them may not cross a threshold, but collectively they're all next to each other, and that's impacting the air that people are breathing, the water, air that people are breathing, and the water that people are drinking. We need to have collective impact laws that hold those polluters accountable. That is how we will make sure we protect what is so amazing and beautiful, the Michigan that God gave us, to make sure we are good stewards of it, to protect it, and holding those corporations that are damaging that and harming that accountable, and making sure that they know that if they have to do a deal with the state of Michigan, with me as governor, they're going to do it on Michiganders' terms.
Thank you, Garland. Chris, the same question.
I have no idea why environmental issues are thrown down as a partisan issue. That affects everybody. Clean air, clean water, clean land. It blows me away that people even think that that is a left progressive issue. You're talking to somebody who has lived it. January 4th, 2016, 100,000 people in Flint could not drink the water because it was poisoned. It was poisoned because failed government allowed it to go on. Fast forward as the emergency manager of the county of Genesee, when you have things like Lockhart Chemical that on a Memorial Day weekend pump 22 miles of chemical in the Flint River, beyond Flint all the way up to Saginaw, and we're doing soft and hard booms to contain it. We're cleaning up little baby turtles and giving health restrictions for people not to fish or go to the water. Like, I lived it. And when you have environmental issues, they impact everybody. But let me just tell you, not only is the cleanup important, prevention is even that much more important. And after we were able to do all of those things, I charged the owner of that corporation with Dana Nessel with felonies. He didn't even live in Genesee County, he lived in Oakland County, but he's poisoning our people and going back to his home. So as governor, it's vital to have an attorney general that is in lockstep with environmental issues. That's the first thing. And so you're preventing it, taking care of it should it happen, and also holding people accountable. And the third thing is when you have companies that come in, if we solve one problem but create 10 others, what's the point of even doing it? So whether it's a data center that is now trying to build jobs, and we all want the economy to be bigger so we can have more for more. But if it harms the people or it taps into a grid that now the people have to pay for, well, tax credits and tax relief are going to the company, then what good did we do for the people? And the answer is nothing. We sent them backwards because those folks don't have a voice. They do with us.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Garland, for that response. So, Erica.
Yeah, sure. So, too many Michiganders, especially those in rural areas and communities of color, struggle to access affordable, quality healthcare. As governor, what is your plan to address healthcare access, and ensure that no one in Michigan has to choose between their health and their financial survival? And Chris, we'll start with you, please.
As I said, I've been a kid paramedic when I was 20 years old. I'm still a licensed paramedic. Been on faculty at the University of Michigan for 27 years in public health administration. Public health, again, is not a partisan issue, and it should be for some and not all. When you look at the great state of Michigan, from the UP all the way down to Monroe, from the east to the west, let's start with mental health. That is an issue that was abandoned under the Engler administration. Jails became mental health institutions. You have places, and we're fortunate in Genesee, Oakland, Washington, Wayne, they have resources. But what about all these other rural communities that don't have that? And they're driving hours just to get treatment. We're going to break it up into 7 districts, have mental health facilities that you can telemed those experts to help reduce crisis 24, 36, 72 hours. Crisis response teams to go to those committees so nobody's left out. But ultimately, you have to work with the federal government. We're seeing it right now with the subsidies being cut. What can the state of Michigan do to help protect Medicaid, Medicare? What can the state of Michigan do to help fill the gaps in those communities that don't have a millage like we do in Genesee County with the Genesee health system? I cannot believe we live in a country where people are still struggling as to where they're going to get their health care from. Who's going to be the provider? We had the fourth provider dip out of Michigan for people of the Affordable Care Act. You've got people whose premiums are going to go up. We know this double, triple, quadruple. They're going to have to make those decisions. A governor needs to stand in the gap and say, okay, this is what we're going to do for Michigan. We have basic needs. We're going to make sure those needs are met, whether it's mental or physical health, but also be that voice in Washington. And this is not happening. When the SNAP benefits were cut, we all stood up in Michigan to provide for people who didn't have those resources. There should not be a single person in Michigan who's struggling with healthcare, where to go, how to get it, and how to pay for it. That's where a governor comes in to build a plan that's sustainable, regardless of Washington. If they want to give us the money, we'll do it the right way.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. Garland, let's hear from you, please.
Everybody in Michigan should be able to have health care, to afford their medicine, and to be able to go to the doctor, whatever kind of doctor they need. And that's why we need to guarantee health care for every Michigander. Again, that's something that we can make happen if people pay people pay their fair share in their tax. We can afford to provide for our people in the state of Michigan. When it comes to having services, like during the COVID-19 pandemic, I led the Racial Disparities Task Force, the only body of its kind in the country that recognized that while the COVID-19 virus was impacting communities of color, it was frankly killing people of color at a rate of 5x of white people, that I wasn't going to let that stand. And so I acted with 27 of the brightest minds across the state of Michigan. And we're the only state in the country that flattened that racial disparity to where we actually eliminated it completely, the disparity between people of color and white folks and how they were impacted by COVID-19 infections or deaths. We did so by making sure that care was equitably available across the state of Michigan, opening up 23 new neighborhood-based health centers that are still open and operating to this day in partnership with federally qualified health centers and others. I also have helped to stand up 40 certified community behavioral health clinics across the state of Michigan to help deal with the fact that mental health services are too few and far between for too many people, and they serve people regardless of their ability to pay, regardless of whether they have insurance. I also opened up almost 300 school-based health clinics. I want to open up at least 500 more as governor because these are amazing and accessible points of care for people to have access to the care that should be guaranteed to them in their communities. They serve the students, they serve the staff, they serve the community. Healthcare is a right. We need to guarantee it for every Michigander. That will make it affordable when people pay their fair share. Healthcare must be available in every community for every need, and we can do that, and we can train folks. The last thing we need to do, we need to pay our healthcare providers better. There's nurses that are on strike in Genesee County. I stood with those Teamsters nurses. They need to be paid fairly. They need to have fair staffing ratios, a Safe Patient Care Act. These are the things that need to happen to make sure healthcare can be provided safely and affordably for Michiganders as well.
Thanks, Garland.
So the next question is about student protest and free speech. So in the past 2 years in particular, students, faculty, community protesters advocate on current issues such as Palestine, DEI, rollbacks, anti-fascism across the country have been prosecuted, doxxed, surveilled, disciplined without due process, and targeted by state and federal governments for their participation in peaceful protests. As governor, how will you address attacks on freedom of speech and academic expression on Michigan's campuses? And we'll start with Garland.
Free speech needs to be protected at all costs on college campuses and every place else in the state of Michigan. I will stand absolutely for that. The right to peaceably assemble, that is a right that is guaranteed in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. I will stand for that on campuses and across the state of Michigan. These students were doing the things that students do. I led student demonstrations when I was on the University of Michigan's campus when our affirmative action policy was challenged all the way to the Supreme Court in 2004. I understand how important that is, and we must protect that right across Michigan. The right to demonstrate is sacred here if this country is living up to its best ideals. These students on the University of Michigan's campus were speaking out on what's happening in Gaza. It's a genocide that is being prosecuted by the Netanyahu government. That is unacceptable, and they have the right to be able to step forward and say so and tell that truth in public. And by the way, everybody said there are a lot of people who are afraid to say that. I am not, and representing the people here in Michigan who are deeply and directly impacted by that in terms of losing family members. I also recognize that it is critically important that we make sure people are safe and are safe from hatred here in the state of Michigan as well. That means Islamophobia. That means anti-Semitism. That means transphobia. That means homophobia, xenophobia, and the hatred of immigrants. It means that we stand for people being safe and being able to be who they are, tell their truth in public, protest and demonstrate, and know they can do so safely in the state of Michigan, and that we won't allow, whether it's the jackbooted thugs from the Trump administration or law enforcement coming and brutalizing people who are just using their First Amendment rights.
Thank you, Garland. Chris, same question.
Well, I definitely would not want to represent law enforcement that brutalizes people for rights. So I agree with that statement because that's not who we are. And I saw that live when George Floyd was killed by somebody who looked like me, who wore a uniform that I had worn, and they protested in Flint. We walked together. Couldn't bring him back from the dead. I couldn't fix race relations at that moment. But what we saw was a common ground to start the process. And in May of 2020, no businesses burned, nobody got arrested. We protested together in peace. We all had unrighteous anger and righteous anger, and we had problems that we had, and we had things that we couldn't solve at the time, but we walked together. That's what protest is. It brings attention. If it gets to the point where somebody has to protest, then we've missed a lot of signs that we could have picked up on and try to fix and find some common ground along the way. I said before, I'm a professor at the University of Michigan in Flint. I know my students for 27 years. I've seen them grow up. These are the brightest minds. They're great kids. There's great people. And if we're going to protect the First Amendment, that means across the board. You may not like what somebody's protesting about, but you give them and protect them while they're protesting. And I think when we use those constitutional amendments and those protections as weapons and not tools of a democracy, that's when we have protests that are clashes. And you see the worst of this country. You see the January 6s. That's not what protest is about. This country was built on protesting, and we're going to continue to protect that. And I'll be right there in the middle of it, trying to figure out how we can fix it, how we can walk together. A protest is to get the attention of the people who can make the decisions, because they obviously weren't hearing the cries from the people before who had no voice. Protests, First Amendment, they make change and they have movement, and we're going to keep those movements going.
Thank you.
Great. I have the last question before closing statements. So, in your role as a statewide elected official, how do you see your responsibility to respond both to statewide issues and global issues related to Gaza, Sudan, Congo, and related struggles for liberation? And Chris, we'll start with you.
There's only 50 governors in the country, and they have to speak to Washington. And in Chicago of 2024, when I stood there in front of 23.5 million people at the DNC, I looked direct the camera and said that I'm going to stand up to bullies. That was a message to one, because I've seen what's happened, and I feel the impact of those decisions. And just because it's someplace that's thousands of miles away, those family members and those friends live here. I have Sudanese friends. I have Syrian friends. I have people that are like Garland said, that are truly feeling the impact of people that are being hurt and harmed. But let me just tell you, you can control your controllables. When October 7th happened, I had police cars protecting the mosques and the synagogues. When those folks that are working and living in those communities that are represented here in Michigan, they need to know that they're protected, even though we can't directly impact what's happening at the global part of it. But we can, as a community, as a leader, take care of the people that are living here. But you have to have a loud voice, and you have to be able to stand up against what's wrong and embrace what's right for the people of Michigan. Just because it's so far away doesn't mean that it doesn't impact the lives here. That's what you can count on with me, is I take care of people no matter where their people are from, their families are from. If they're in Michigan, they're our people and they're our family.
Thanks, Chris. Garland, we'll hear from you next, please.
The state of Michigan is globally connected. We're globally connected culturally. We have people from every single part of the world who have come here, and therefore people in Michigan have heritage and connection and family in every single part of the world. Michigan hurts when people are hurting around the world. That is why it was so important to me to speak out on what's happening in Palestine and calling what it is a genocide. It's crazy, I'm the only state elected executive in America who has said that, who has told that truth. And yeah, there's a genocide happening in Sudan. And I've spoken to people who have Sudanese heritage here in the state of Michigan about the pain that they are experiencing. People, I believe, want, the governor of Michigan, they want public servants to know that they see them, and to understand and to be able to listen and have empathy, and then say that I see you, I will stand with you, I will work with you, we will help to make sure people are safe. And that we also will reject any hatred that is coming toward you in the state of Michigan from people who are acting out on behalf of what's happening someplace else on the globe. I will stand for that. And when I talked about my last answer, standing against hate, that is exactly what I mean. I will not tolerate people attacking people in Michigan out of racism and bigotry and prejudice. I will not tolerate people attacking people out of anti-Semitism. I will not tolerate people getting attacked due to Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia, xenophobia, any of it. Michigan is a place where everyone is seen, safe, respected, and protected, and you can be your best here and be confident to know that your state will have your back, that your governor will have your back when I'm the governor of Michigan. So we have a global presence economically and culturally. We also have people from all around the globe who call Michigan home, and I'll protect them.
Thanks so much, Garland.
Thank, yeah, thank you both for answering all those questions. We are towards the end. So now our candidates have 2 minutes each to make closing statements, and we'll start with Garland first.
Well, y'all, thank you so much for the forum. Thank you for the questions. I appreciate the breadth of issues that were discussed here because there is a lot on the plate of the next governor of Michigan. You know, I think that we have to focus on making sure we're doing everything we can so that Michiganders are confident that they can be their best, they can afford to stay here and succeed in Michigan. We've made so much progress in this state, especially over the last 7 years. We have built housing. I've put 40,000 housing units online, the fastest rate we've ever built housing in the last few years. Opened up 1,400 new childcare facilities in 13 months, 40 new certified community behavioral health clinics, started a clean slate automatic criminal record expungement program that's cleared 4 million offenses from people's records and has 400,000 people now able to fully access civic and economic life and get a house, an apartment, or go to school, etc. That's a lot of progress. And this Trump regime can take it all away. And they are hell bent on harming people across the state of Michigan. Well, as governor, they'll have to come through me to do that. I will fight for Michiganders to protect our progress and use it as a platform to be able to do more, to get more for people so we can guarantee childcare, we can guarantee pre-K, we can guarantee debt-free college. If you commit to Michigan, we can guarantee access to housing. We can make sure every single Michigander that there's health care for all of them and people can retire with dignity in this state. Michigan has always played an important role in defining the direction of this nation. And we need a governor who has the vision to be able to both have to listen to the people of Michigan and then to go make things happen. That's what I do. I'm an engineer. I make systems work for people. We can build it together. We can work together so we can win together on behalf of every person from every corner of our state. We'll get it done. Thank you so much for having me. Let's stand tall for Michigan. I ask for your support.
Now, Chris. Thank you, Garland. Now, Chris.
I want to say thanks to Garland. Every time that we're out there, he's a gentleman. And I told you that even yielding some of my time just to edify Garland, he's the real deal behind the scenes. And he's a good man, a good husband, a good father. So I appreciate him being on this call. Thanks to everybody here. It takes a lot of guts to form a coalition in today's world and to be a part of this, make order out of chaos. And Flint teaches you how to do that. Flint in Genesee County is a county that represents virtually every county in the state of Michigan, from big cities to rural towns that we have, from people from all walks of life. It's a cornucopia of people and cultures. And we have had our true challenges. So when you want to know what's Chris going to do as governor, just look what we've done in Genesee County with major challenges. My one goal is to make people's lives better. Not just these people or those people, but just to make people's lives better. There's a lot of ways we can do that. And by doing that, you're going to protect them, you're going to serve them, and you're going to bring people together. honestly believe that in 2026, if we have continued division, we're going to repeat a civil unrest that we have never seen in the history of our generation. You need unifiers with strong personalities that have mark on the tree that can show that a white dude from Flint should not be able to step into a black crowd and say, time out. Why don't we walk together? And they believe me because they've seen the work I've done. They trust. Governor has the ability to do that. So I'm going to protect, I'm going to serve, I'm going to bring people together. I saw it live when the LDS church was attacked. The entire faith-based community got together. People from all walks of life. I had imams offering their own mosques for the LDS to come in and worship. I believe in unity. I stand for unity. I'm going to protect and serve people along the way. I appreciate you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I love everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Garland. Thank you, Chris. So thank you so much for joining us. It means a lot, especially because these are very important issues for us, for everyone really in Michigan. And I wanted to thank all our guests on Zoom who joined us tonight for an event. I know it's a Friday night, but really appreciate you being here. I hope that that you did find this forum and the questions valuable. I did want to at least share a bit of news of what we've been doing. As you may have seen, we have endorsed several candidates in especially convention races right now, since that is coming up in April. We endorsed Ellie Savitt for Attorney General, as well as Agogo Adebie for Secretary of State. So do remember that these convention races are very, very important. They're like pretty much mini primaries for these very, very important roles. It is important to register as an MDP member it's usually 30 days before the convention. So by March 19th, and then also be at the MDP convention on April 19th in Detroit to vote for the candidates in these very critical races. I know for governor, you're not a convention race, you're in the primary. So pretty much it will be a statewide primary. But for these specific races that are coming up in April, they are primarily MDP members and convention race. Erica put some links there to mobilize with us to support candidates. So there's a link if you want to join as an MDP member and to be able to mobilize and get up-to-date information about what we're doing for the convention. And as we get closer to 2026, we will be hosting several other opportunities to hear from candidates from different races as well, and to connect on crucial issues across the state and grow our people-powered movement. There will be more forums, there will be more meet and greets and events. We've held several events throughout the year. And so please do sign up to receive our updates throughout our listserv. So there is a link that Erica posted for Join Our Coalition. And follow us on social media. So we have Facebook, Instagram. So please do follow us there. And Erica did put that in the chat as well. And really, we cannot do the support without all of you, but also we do need donations to make things happen and to support these candidates, but also hold these important community meetings, meet and greets, as well as town halls to make sure that we do uplift marginalized community voices. So please do consider in any way that you can to support us. Erica did put that link there as well. And we do, as I said, we do have several endorsed candidates, as I mentioned before. There will be some more, exciting news to come, especially a U of M Regent candidate who will truly stand for communities. So there will be more news to come. And again, these donations will help us with flyers, mailers, busing needs, and this is, primarily for the convention race. But we do hope to expand. Right now, our endorsements are focused on statewide races, but we are looking at potentially expanding to some other key races like congressional races and others. But honestly, we can't do it without all of you. And it is truly a people-powered movement. So thank you again, and thank you again for the candidates, and thank you for those that have joined us. And I guess we're done. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Friday.